There is a stretch of coastline in northern Norway where the mountains simply stop pretending. They do not slope gently toward the sea. They do not give way to beaches or lowlands or any of the gradual transitions that most landscapes offer between high ground and water. They drop vertical walls of rock, falling directly into the Norwegian Sea, as if the island itself is refusing to bow to the ocean pressing against it from every direction. And in the harbors tucked between those walls, in the small clusters of red and yellow buildings visible from the water, people wake up every morning and go about their lives. This film is about those people, not about the landscape, though the landscape is extraordinary. Not about the tourist experience, though visitors do come, and the reasons they come are easy to understand once you have seen this coastline from the water. This film is about the specific, daily, ordinary, and not ordinary experience of being a person who has decided that this is where they live, who catches their fish, raises their children, endures their winters, and goes to sleep at night with the Norwegian Sea audible through the walls. We are going to travel 4 sets of Norwegian islands, from the least known to the most famous. From Vesterålen, the quieter neighbor that tourists pass through on their way elsewhere, to Træna and Røst, 2 islands so small and so far offshore that between them they hold fewer than 1,000 permanent residents in communities that have been fishing these same waters for more than 8,000 years. To Svalbard, the archipelago so far north that the bears that share it with the humans must be carried in mind every single time a person steps outside. And finally to Lofoten, the one that everyone has seen in photographs, whose jagged peaks reflected in still harbor water are one of the most reproduced images in all of travel photography. To ask what it is actually like to live inside that postcard. The people who live on these islands did not choose convenience. They did not choose easy winters, reliable infrastructure, or proximity to anything that most people consider essential. They chose something else, something that is harder to name, but consistently present in the way they speak about where they are. They chose a relationship with the sea and the sky and the light that the rest of the world cannot offer them. This is life on Norway's remote islands. Most people who come to this part of Norway have heard of Lofoten. Very few have heard of Vesterålen. They sit directly next to each other. Lofoten to the south, Vesterålen just to the north, connected by ferry, but separated by something more than geography. Lofoten is sharp. Its mountains are the dramatic kind, the ones that appear in photographs and stop a conversation. Vesterålen is softer, rounder peaks, broader valleys, green, where Lofoten tends toward the austere, the kind of beauty that requires you to slow down enough to actually see it, which is perhaps why it has remained, in the age of Instagram and viral travel photography, largely undiscovered by the crowds that have flooded its famous neighbor to the south. 30,000 people live across Vesterålen's 4 main islands and roughly 1,300 smaller ones. Fishing has been the foundation of life here since before the Viking Age. The waters west of the islands sit above one of the most extraordinary marine environments in the Northern Hemisphere. a place where the continental shelf ends abruptly just offshore, dropping away into deep ocean so rapidly that sperm whales can hunt giant squid at depths of 1,000 meters within sight of the coast. The town of Andenes, at the northern tip of Andøya Island, sits closest to this underwater canyon. It is the only place in Norway, and one of the very few places on Earth, where sperm whales can be reliably observed year-round. Not on a lucky day, not in a particularly good season. Year-round, because the food source that brings them here does not move away. For the people who live in Andenes, this proximity has been part of daily life for generations. The whale-watching industry that serves tourists is recent. The awareness of what lives offshore is ancient. Fishermen working these waters in the early morning have always known that the whales were out there somewhere below them, hunting in the dark at depths that no human technology of any previous century could have reached. Inland from Andenes, across the distinctive flat bogland of Andøya, unique in northern Norway, where most landscapes are either steep mountain or narrow valley, not the wide peat-covered plain that stretches here, sits one of the stranger facts of life in Vesterålen, a rocket launch facility. Andøya Space has been launching sounding rockets since 1962. In 2025, it hosted Europe's first private orbital launch attempt. The people of this island live simultaneously with whale migrations visible from the shore and rocket launches audible from the garden. In the village of Norway, the layers of this community's history are visible in a single walk. The village was abandoned in the 1970s. Too remote, too difficult to supply, too small to be economically viable in a Norway that was consolidating its coastal communities into larger, more connected centers. It became a ghost town. Then, in the following decades, something unexpected happened. A group of people, many of them from Germany, drawn by the specific quality of the light and the silence and the isolation the village offered, began buying the old buildings and moving in. Today, Nyksund has a handful of permanent residents, a restaurant, an art gallery, a recording studio, and the particular kind of energy that exists in places that have come back from the edge of disappearing. Above Nyksund and the surrounding coastal villages, on the high ridgelines where the vegetation thins and the rock takes over, Sami reindeer herders have grazed their animals for centuries. The reindeer move according to seasons that have nothing to do with the fishing calendar or the tourist calendar below them. They are simply there, as they have always been, part of the layered human presence that Vesterålen carries without making a particular fuss about it. Vesterålen is the Norway that Norway kept largely for itself. It is what Lofoten was before the photographs went viral. Alive with the same geology and the same fishing tradition and the same particular northern light, but without the cues. "30 nautical miles off the Helgeland coast, the Arctic Circle passes through a cluster of 477 islands, islets, and skerries that together make up the municipality of Træna. 4 of those islands are inhabited. The total permanent population is approximately 450 people, and according to the archaeological evidence recovered from a large cave on the island of Sana, a cave whose ceiling rises so high and whose walls curve so broadly that the islanders have always called it nature's cathedral. Those 450 people are the latest chapter in a continuous human presence that stretches back more than 9,000 years. 9,000 years. The same islands, the same waters, the same deep, cold seas that supply the same fish that have always supplied the same essential reason to be here at all. The main island, Husøy, is the kind of place where the density of life surprises you. Houses close together, boats in the harbor, children visible. The sense of a community that is actually functioning rather than simply persisting. The people of Træna are, by general account, notably open to visitors. The kind of easy hospitality that develops in places where strangers are always potentially interesting rather than intrusive, because the community is small enough that everyone already knows everyone else, and a new face represents something welcome. Every July, Træna hosts a music festival whose stage inside Kirkeheleren, the cathedral cave on Sanna, is arguably the most extraordinary concert venue on Earth. Thousands of people make the journey to an island that the rest of the year receives almost no outside attention, to hear music performed inside a space that human beings have been gathering in since the Stone Age. Then the festival ends, the boats leave, and Træna becomes itself again. "140 kilometers to the southwest, at the very tip of the Lofoten archipelago, lies Røst, Norway's outermost island, the southwestern end of a chain that begins deep in the mainland and finishes here, a cluster of flat land barely 11 meters above sea level at its highest point, 100 kilometers from the nearest other inhabited place. Between 450 and 500 people live on Røst. The island is so flat and so exposed that the wind it receives is the unmediated Atlantic wind. Nothing stands between Røst and the open ocean to the west, and the ocean does not let this go unacknowledged. The fish-drying racks that cover large sections of the island catch that wind and use it, turning the winter cod catch into the stockfish that has been exported from this island to the Italian market for nearly 600 years. The Italy connection is specific and historical. In 1431, a Venetian merchant ship captained by a man named Pietro Querini was caught in a storm while sailing from Crete to Bruges. The ship foundered somewhere in the Norwegian Sea. The survivors drifted for weeks in a lifeboat before washing ashore on Røst, where the islanders found them and kept them alive through the winter. Querini returned to Italy the following spring, carrying with him a cargo of dried stockfish that the people of Røst had given him. That shipment is considered the origin of the Italian stockfish trade, the beginning of a commercial and cultural relationship between this tiny, windswept Norwegian island and the cuisine of northern Italy that has now lasted nearly 6 centuries. Today, Røst has a small airport where Widerøe turboprops land daily, connecting the island to Bodø and Leknes. You can walk from the terminal to the harbor in minutes. There is a ferry that comes from Bodø, carrying a mix of cars, cargo, and foot passengers who are the island's connection to the mainland supply chain. When the winter cod season arrives in January, the population of Røst increases 3 or 4 times. Fishermen from the mainland come to work the most intense weeks of the year, living temporarily in whatever accommodation the island provides before returning when the season ends. For the people who live here year-round, the sea is not a backdrop. It is not a view. It is the entire material basis of everything, of the economy, of the calendar, of the particular quality of attention that people who live very close to something powerful develop over time. Træna and Røst are not the Norway of the travel magazines. They are older than that, and quieter, and considerably more honest about what it actually costs to live at the edge of the sea. Right now, on the island of Spitsbergen, in the Svalbard archipelago, there are approximately 3,000 polar bears and approximately 2,750 people. The bears outnumber the humans. This is not a metaphor, and it is not a minor detail of living here that can be set aside once noted. Every person who goes outside the boundaries of Longyearbyen, every person who walks into the surrounding mountains, every person who travels across the frozen plateau between settlements, every person who goes anywhere that is not inside a building or on one of the town's 50 kilometers of paved road carries a firearm, not as a precaution, as a requirement. Svalbard sits at 78 degrees north latitude, 12 degrees further north than the Arctic Circle, halfway between mainland Norway and the North Pole. The archipelago belongs to Norway under a 1920 treaty that contains an unusual provision. Citizens of any of the treaty's signatory nations can live and work here without a visa or residency permit. The result is a community of roughly 40 nationalities living together in the world's northernmost town, governed by rules that exist nowhere else on Earth and shaped by conditions that most humans will never experience. From late October until late January, the sun does not rise, not reduced hours, not a brief appearance at noon. It does not rise. The sky, in the middle of the day, goes through shades of blue and purple and deep navy, reaches a faint twilight glow around midday, if the weather allows it, and then darkens again. For 113 days, the people of Longyearbyen live without direct sunlight. They go to work in the dark. They come home in the dark. Their children go to school in the dark. And many of them, this is the part that surprises every outsider who hears it, describe this as their favorite time of year. The summer in Svalbard is full. The midnight sun circles continuously overhead for months. Tourists arrive. Research teams operate. The town fills with energy and activity and a social busyness that is exhausting in its own way. When the dark season arrives and the last visitors leave and the population settles back to its winter core, something changes. The pace slows. The community turns inward. People find each other in the evenings in ways they do not during the busy months. The northern lights appear not just at night, but sometimes in the middle of what is technically the afternoon, because everything is night, and the curtains of green and violet light moving across the sky above the town become part of ordinary Tuesday evenings. Longyearbyen is a young town in the way that mining towns are young. John Monroe, Longyear, an American businessman, established the first coal mine here in 1906. The settlement that grew around it was not a community that people moved to intending to stay. It was a place people came to work, as remote extraction communities have always functioned. The last active coal mine closed in 2025, ending the industry that created the town. What remains is a community that has reinvented itself around Arctic research, tourism, and a population that increasingly chooses to stay, not because a mine needs workers, but because Svalbard itself has become the reason. Scientists from universities around the world maintain research stations here, studying glaciers, climate change, atmospheric chemistry, and the biology of the high Arctic. Adventure guides lead expeditions onto the glaciers and across the plateau on snowmobiles. Artists and writers come for residencies and sometimes do not leave. The Svalbard Global Seed Vault, carved into the permafrost of a nearby mountain and designed to hold seed samples from every major crop plant on Earth in case of a catastrophic global event, sits above the town as a reminder that this particular piece of Norwegian territory holds a responsibility to the rest of the species. The permafrost itself is changing. Temperatures in Svalbard have risen faster than almost anywhere else on Earth, more than 4 degrees Celsius since the 1970s, against the global average that is a fraction of that. The glaciers that carve into the fjords are retreating visibly year over year. Buildings whose foundations were designed for permanently frozen ground are shifting as that ground thaws. The landscape that drew people here, the science that keeps researchers here, and the daily infrastructure that keeps the town standing are all being altered by the same process the scientists on the hill are studying. The people who live here know this. They are watching it happen from inside it. That particular form of knowledge, of living in the place where the change is most visible and most immediate, gives the community of Longyearbyen a relationship to the subject of climate that is different from how it reads in a newspaper or a report. It reads in the view from your kitchen window. Svalbard is the most extreme version of the question this entire film is asking. Why would a person choose to live here? And the answer that the people who do live here give consistently across many languages and many different professional reasons for being on the archipelago comes back to the same thing. Because nowhere else on Earth offers this. Everyone has seen this. The jagged peaks rising straight from the water, the red cabins reflected in the harbor, the particular quality of the northern light that turns the whole landscape gold for an hour in the afternoon and then drops into a blue-gray dusk that lasts until morning. These images have circled the internet, appeared on magazine covers, been used in smartphone advertisements, and drawn so many photographers with tripods to the same spots that the locations themselves have become famous landmarks of photography rather than simply places. 24,000 people live in Lofoten. They live alongside the photographs in the actual villages and small towns that those photographs extract their beauty from, going about lives that exist on the other side of the camera from everything the images show. The cod is where Lofoten's reality begins, because it is where Lofoten's history began. Since the Viking Age, more than 1,000 years, the Arctic cod has migrated each winter from the Barents Sea to the waters around Lofoten to spawn. The fish arrive in January. The fishermen are ready. For 3 months, from January through April, the Lofoten fishery is the largest seasonal cod fishery in the world. The catch is processed, dried on wooden racks, and shipped as stockfish to markets across Europe, Africa, and South America. In Henningsvær, the fishing village most associated with this tradition, The unofficial motto has been stated plainly for years: "In cod we trust." The rorbu, the traditional red fisherman's cabin, was not designed as a tourist accommodation. It was designed to house the mainland fishermen who came to Lofoten each winter for the season, who needed somewhere to sleep between the days on the water. The design was practical, small, close to the harbor, built on stilts over the water when possible, so that a boat could be tied directly to the door. Many of the rorbuer that tourists now rent and photograph were working fishermen's accommodation within living memory. Some are still used during the fishing season. The relationship between the fishing community and the tourism that now arrives alongside it is not simple. In villages like Træna and Hamnøy, which have become particularly saturated with visitors during the peak summer months, local residents have talked openly about the tension between the income that tourism brings and the pressure it places on the infrastructure, the landscape, and the daily experience of living in a place that the outside world treats primarily as a backdrop. In Nusfjord, one of the oldest and best-preserved fishing villages in Lofoten, its general store from 1907 still standing, its rorbuer restored without losing their essential character, a different balance seems to have been found. The village functions as a living museum that still feels lived in, where the weight of what was done here across centuries is present without being curated out of existence. And then there is the light. In summer, the sun does not set. It circles the sky in a slow spiral, dipping toward the horizon around midnight, but never going below it, so that the entire island chain exists for weeks in a continuous golden afternoon that makes sleep feel like an interruption. People walk on the beach at 2 in the morning because the light is there, and the beach is there, and the mountains reflected in the still water are there, and there is no reasonable explanation for not being outside when all of this is available. In winter, the reverse. Not Svalbard's total darkness. The sun still rises in Lofoten, however briefly, but a darkness deep enough and long enough that the northern lights become a regular companion to daily life from September through the spring. They appear without announcement. A green shimmer above the mountain that strengthens into curtains, shifts into bands, folds and collapses and rebuilds in a display that people who have lived here for decades still step outside to watch every time. The people of Lofoten are broadly people who have inherited a place and chosen to stay in it, or people who came for the summer and found, by the time autumn arrived, that leaving was less possible than they had planned for. The islands seem to do this to people who are susceptible to a particular combination of landscape, community, and light that the rest of Norway and the rest of the world does not reliably offer. The postcard is real. The life inside the postcard is also real, and it is more complicated, more seasonal, more physically demanding, and more quietly extraordinary than any image of it can hold. If you stay on these islands long enough, you stop looking at the mountains and you start looking at the sky. The landscapes are beautiful, but the landscapes are fixed. The rock does not change from one hour to the next. The light does. In the north, because of the angle at which the sun hits the earth, the light is never simply overhead. It is always coming from the side, long and low, casting shadows that stretch across entire fjords, turning the side of a mountain into a wall of amber or violet or gray. It is light that behaves less like a physical condition and more like a character in the story, moving between the islands and changing the meaning of everything it touches. And that, ultimately, is what connects the rocket engineers in Andøya to the fishermen in Røst, the scientists in Longyearbyen to the people living inside the postcard of Lofoten. They are all, in different ways, people who have chosen to live in a place where the terms of existence are set by the natural world, clearly and without compromise. They have chosen to live where the winters are long and the sun disappears for months, not because they dislike the light, but because they understand that the light is only truly understood once you have spent 100 days waiting for its return. They have chosen to live where the ocean is loud, because a quiet world feels to them like a world that has been muted, a world where the volume has been turned down until the texture is gone. Life on these islands is not for everyone. It requires a specific kind of internal quiet, a willingness to be small in a landscape that is very large, and an acceptance that there are days when the ferry will not come, the plane will not land, and the weather will decide exactly what you are going to do with your afternoon. But for the people who have made this choice, the ones who wake up every morning with the Arctic Sea at their doorstep, there is no other way to live. Because once you have seen the midnight sun turn the peaks of Lofoten into gold at 2 in the morning, or watched the northern lights move above the frozen valleys of Svalbard, or felt the unmediated Atlantic wind on the cliffs of Røst, the rest of the world can begin to feel a little too crowded, a little too soft, and a little too far from the edge of things. This is the end of the world, and for the people who live here, it is exactly where they belong. There is a question that runs beneath this entire film, and it is not really a question about Norway. It is a question about what it costs to live in a place that demands something from you, about whether the things that convenience has removed from modern life, the darkness, the cold, the rhythms that cannot be overridden by technology, were costs worth paying, or whether they were something else. A form of contact with the world that most of us no longer have access to, and are only beginning to understand we might be missing. The people of Vesterålen, Træna, Røst, Svalbard, and Lofoten have not solved this question. They have simply chosen, each in their own way and for their own reasons, not to avoid it. We want to hear from you. If you could spend one full year on any one of these 4 Norwegian island communities, the quiet of Vesterålen, the ancient rhythm of Træna, the total darkness of Svalbard, or the famous beauty of Lofoten, which would you choose? And what do you think you would find there that you do not have now? Tell us in the comments. We read every single one. If this film made you think differently about what a life close to nature actually looks and feels like, share it with someone who deserves to ask that question too. Next week, we are going to a place that has never had a single permanent resident in nearly 300 years of recorded history. An island the earth keeps warm from below and the ocean keeps frozen from above. An island where the only people who have ever arrived came by accident or by scientific mission, and where, in 1964, someone found an empty lifeboat on the shore with no explanation that has ever been satisfactorily given. We will be there. We will see you there.